Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And we are officially at the halfway point of Jean Grey's most important story since her resurrection in 2018. This 4-issue miniseries by Louise Simonson spun out of the events of 2023's Hellfire Gala, but it has already been set up to have a much bigger impact, and it goes beyond simply having Jean Grey navigate life, death, and resurrection once more. The first 2 issues of this series gave us haunting yet heartbreaking scenarios from Jean's perspective. In trying to figure out where everything went so horribly wrong, she explores the fateful decisions that she's made throughout her lengthy history. She contemplates what would have happened if she hadn't erased her memories after her trip to the future with the rest of the original 5 X-Men. She contemplates what would have happened if she let someone else pilot that shuttle on the fateful day she first encountered the Phoenix Force. But in both cases, Jean found out that making different decisions would have only led to worse outcomes. And that just further amplified the many tragedies she's endured throughout her life. But despite these agonizing realizations, Jean is still determined to fix the present through the past in Jean Grey number 3. And that leads her to the events of Inferno, another defining moment in her history, as well as one of the most defining stories of Louise Simonson's famous run on X Factor in the 1980s. This is the event that brought Jean's conflict with her clone, Madelyne Pyror, to a head. It was another tragic struggle, both for her and for Madelyne. After discovering that she was a clone of Jean created by Mr. Sinister, meant only to be a mechanism for birthing the child of Cyclops and Jean Grey, Madelyne went insane. She ventured to Limbo to become the Goblin Queen. This eventually led to a painful confrontation that would go on to define her, Jean, Cyclops, and an infant Nathan Summers for years to come. Now, quick side note, if you haven't read Inferno, I highly recommend checking it out. It's not required reading before checking out Jean Grey number 3, but it's one of the most well-regarded stories in X-Men history for a reason, and it certainly adds greater weight to the events of this issue. But even as Jean revisits this profound moment from her history, the events of the present are already starting to catch up to her. In the pages of Immortal X-Men 16, we see Hope Summers and the remnants of Krakoa's mutant population find her in this strange desert realm. Neither she nor Jean seems to know what's going on, but there is a reference to the White Hot Room, which is a beautiful act of foreshadowing for those who know anything about Jean's history. However, before that little detail catches up with her, most of Jean Grey number 3 takes place in the past. While Inferno had many critical moments and fateful choices, one of the biggest turning points involved baby Nathan Summers. Originally, Cyclops and Jean Grey were unable to rescue him from the Goblin Queen's forces. And as a result, Madelyne Pyror injected baby Nathan with the legacy virus. And this act led to the heartbreaking decision to send him into the future where he could be treated, which ultimately led Nathan Summers to growing up to become Cable. But this time, Jean contemplates what would have happened if they had saved baby Nathan. Perhaps if they'd kept him from Madelyne and prevented him from being injected with the legacy virus in the first place, things would have turned out differently. And the end of Inferno wouldn't have been so bittersweet, and she and Cyclops could have continued being a family with baby Nathan. It is a tempting scenario for Jean, and it's something she and Cyclops actively pursued during their time with X Factor. It's even something we've seen manifest with Cyclops and Jean Grey during the Krakoa era. Early on, they functioned much more like a family unit with Rachel, Cable, Scott's father Corsair, and even Gabriel Summers. In that sense, it's entirely understandable that Jean would try to change the past to accommodate this. Her love for her friends, her family, and her children have always been a driving force for her, going all the way back to her days with the original 5 X-Men. But, much like before, there are complications as well as consequences to such choices. And Madelyne Pyror herself is the greatest manifestation of those consequences. Because not retrieving baby Nathan changes a lot for her. Now, some details do play out as they did in the original story. Madelyne still learns about her true origins from Mr. Sinister. But now, without the child that she rightly birthed, she leans much harder into her Goblin Queen persona. Because instead of infecting baby Nathan with the legacy virus, she ends up infecting herself with it, triggering a transformation that somehow makes her even more menacing. On top of that, she taps into her shared heritage with Jean Grey to access more of the Phoenix Force, and with it, she flat out slaughters Mr. Sinister, Sim, and Nazareth. Madelyne's motivations here aren't that complicated. Having lost so much, feeling abandoned and used, and having a full-fledged identity crisis on top of all that, she is rightly furious, and she is more motivated than ever to inflict vengeance on everyone and everything around her. What follows from here is a fiery rampage, the likes of which supersedes the original plot of Inferno very quickly. Now overpowered and exceedingly determined, Madelyne attacks New York City. She attacks SHIP, the home base of X-Factor, and she attacks Jean and Cyclops. But this time, having baby Nathan in their care doesn't give her pause. If anything, that only enrages her even more. She does not hesitate at all to just burn Cyclops alive on the spot, much to Jean's horror. This also marks the second issue in a row where he's been killed right in front of her. But this time, he tries to at least save his child, entrusting him to Jean, who now has to defend him from the Goblin Queen's wrath. But as determined as Jean might be, and as powerful as she is, even without the Phoenix Force, she is simply no match for Madelyne in this form. And the end result is every bit as horrific as the others, if not more so. The Goblin Queen ultimately wins. All of New York is flooded, the gates of Limbo are wide open, and there's no one left to stop them. All this happened because Jean believed that saving baby Nathan would have changed the course of the conflict for the better. But even if her hopes and motivations were pure, a greater tragedy ultimately unfolded as a result. And in this case, I feel like Jean Grey number 3 offers a particular message regarding Jean's story that's both poetic and appropriate. Because during the original Inferno storyline, the dynamic between Jean and Madelyne was an important catalyst. Because before Jean came back to life, Madelyne had it all. A loving husband, a beautiful child, and a good life for her and her family. But then Jean comes back and suddenly, it's all gone. She loses everything, and every time Jean gains something, be it Cyclops' love or the child she birthed, she loses even more. That's what ultimately drove her to become the Goblin Queen. Jean Grey number 3 even dares to add a little extra nuance to this dynamic. Because for so many years, X-Men fans have cited Madelyne Pyror and the events of Inferno to really denigrate Jean and Cyclops. And whenever a fan wants to highlight why they don't like him or Jean, they'll often point to Madelyne. They'll say that Cyclops left his wife and child, and he's responsible for what she became. But Jean says outright in this issue that she and Cyclops looked for her and baby Nathan. They thought she was dead. They didn't drive her to consort with demons and become the Goblin Queen. She herself chose that path. But she chose it because she did not know the bigger picture, and the worst part is she couldn't have known. It's tragic, but it's very much in keeping with the themes that this series has laid out. Jean Grey is a loving and compassionate person who tries to do the right thing. She tries to protect and cherish those she loves. But despite all her power and her compassion, she often finds herself at the mercy of circumstances, and no matter what she chooses, the end result is just more tragedy. Saving baby Nathan from Madelyne and the legacy virus might have seemed like a better recourse, but in the end, all it did was drive Madelyne further over the edge, and everyone Jean cared about suffered as a result. At this point, the message is painfully clear. Jean cannot escape the choices and circumstances that she's made. It doesn't matter how many moments she tries to revisit. Any minor change in her life story, even one that seems small and justified, it only compounds the tragedy even more. It's a harsh realization, but that same realization leads to a revelation at the end of the issue, and without speculating too much, I can safely say it sets the stage for a hell of a finale. Because now, Jean is done trying to fix the present through the past. Now, she has to face the full ramifications of her choices in the present. This brings us back to the white-hot room that was mentioned in Immortal X-Men number 16, a domain that Jean has ventured to before as the Phoenix. This place is meant to be the nexus of creation, but this time, it's the nexus of multiple versions of Jean from multiple eras and universes. Suddenly, she's no longer facing the tragic past or the bitter present. She's facing every version of herself that led her to this point, and in a place where the power of the Phoenix Force burns brightest, no less. I don't claim to know what this means for Jean. I surely don't claim to know how it'll impact the events unfolding in other X-Men comics. But Jean Grey number 3 definitely succeeds in preparing this character for a defining moment. We have seen how far she's willing to go to save her loved ones, and we've seen how much tragedy she's incurred through every choice, recourse, and consequence. And now, we're about to see how Jean Grey channels all of this into the next phase of her story. And whatever happens in that story, whatever it may lead to throughout the Marvel Universe, I'm confident in saying that it's sure to be a truly uncanny experience. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.